My advertisement simply stated that I wanted to hire the finest long-distance marksman in the world. That you wouldn't like the bucket a bit closer?
Oh, Jesus!
You're hired.
An American cowboy and marksman named Matthew Quigley practices shooting, perfects his skills, and learns how to hit a target from incredible distances. Then, as he searches for a new challenge, he finds an ad from Australia that searches for a man of his talent and answers it by writing M. Quigley 900 yards on a copy of the ad, which he then punctures with bullet holes. Intrigued by this unique response, the wealthy Australian employer Elliot Marston invites Matthew to Australia and promises to give him $50 worth of gold coins upon arrival. Imagine being so confident in your skill that you would travel around the world for a job without even finding out the details of your post. Got to appreciate the courage. Matthew begins his journey and arrives at Fremantle, Australia 3 months later. As soon as he gets off the overcrowded boat, Matthew confronts a rude man mistreating elderly passengers.
Oh, get the hell out of the way!
I'm so sorry, Mr. Quigley.
Then, Matthew enters the crowded port city, overwhelmed by prisoners, vendors, and locals waiting for new arrivals. After walking for a few minutes, Matthew sees a young woman dubbed Crazy Cora aggressively fighting off a group of men who are trying to drag her onto their wagon, and interferes by ordering them to let her go. To Matthew's confusion, the grateful Crazy Cora stares at him for a moment, refers to him as Roy, and joyfully greets him.
God, you've come for me. I'm sorry, Roy. I'm sorry for everything.
Despite Matthew's efforts to assure Crazy Cora that he's neither Roy nor knows anyone by that name, the young woman clings to him, tells him that she's been waiting for him for a long time, and asks him to take her home. To make matters worse, the group of men stand their ground and demand to take Crazy Cora with them. Matthew takes a moment to consider his options and decides that he cannot let a young woman be subjected to such treatment. Hence, hoping to settle the matter for good, Matthew challenges the men to a fight. What a way to announce your arrival in a foreign country, right?
I'm new here, so I ain't rightly certain.
In the fight, Matthew was forced to take on 3 men all by himself, until Crazy Cora comes to his aid. With the young woman's help, Matthew beats up the men, and the duo manages to defend themselves well, while the local crowd cheers them on. Then, annoyed by Crazy Cora, who continues to refer to him as Roy, Matthew angrily announces his identity, which shocks the men, as they recognize his name and realize that he's the man their wealthy rancher boss Elliot has sent them to pick up.
And you're the fella Marston sent us to bring back.
The men soon change their tone, calm down, load Matthew and Crazy Cora on their wagon, and start on the long journey to Elliot's station, joking amongst each other. And after traveling all day, they take a break for the night. During the night, Crazy Cora insists on taking care of Matthew and continues to call him Roy. Having had enough, Matthew gives her a final warning.
Now look, lady, I don't know no Roy, so you just leave me alone.
The next morning, the group starts their journey early in the morning, and after traveling half the day, they run into the commander of the British Armed Forces, Major Ashley Pitt, who oversees the British colony of Australia, and his cavalry and Elliot's men courteously greet them. However, soon, Matthew shows his disregard for their power and annoys them.
Well, Lieutenant.
Major?
Major.
In the evening, the group reaches Elliot's land and continues traveling to the ranch for the next 2 days.
Lady, you are about a half a bubble off a plum, and that's for sure and for certain.
Then, the group decides to take a break and rest for the night. In the downtime, Matthew tries to get to know Crazy Cora, but loses his patience when she continues calling him Roy and talks about random stories he doesn't understand.
There hasn't been anyone else but you. You know that, don't you?
After traveling for another day, the group finally reaches the ranch and is greeted by Elliot's men upon arrival. Soon, Elliot arrives, politely greets Matthew, and attempts to get him set up in his lodge. However, Matthew gets straight down to business and demands that he be paid the $50 worth of gold coins.
You intrigued me, Mr. Quigley.
After paying Matthew, Elliot shares that he has received 21 applications to his ad from all over the world and stresses that he found Matthew's unusual response to be the most intriguing. Then, Elliot asks Matthew to prove his marksmanship, and Matthew comfortably agrees. Matthew then takes out his special modified rifle, which impresses Elliot, and prepares to prove himself.
It's converted to use a special 45 caliber 110.
Elliot then orders one of his men to carry a target and ride his horse away from the compound until Matthew orders him to stop.
Tell me when you want him to stop.
As everyone watches in awe and wonders if he's lost his mind, Matthew lets the man ride away for a few minutes and finally gives the signal. Matthew then prepares to shoot the target while ignoring everyone's, including Elliot's, snarky, doubtful comments. He then surprises everyone by hitting the target, which is placed an extraordinary distance away. To add to the shock factor and prove that it's not just luck, Matthew shoots a couple of times more and manages to hit the target each time. As the men mumble in both jealousy and admiration, Elliot hires Matthew on the spot.
You're hired.
Then, as Crazy Cora cheers him on, still referring to him as Roy, Matthew worries about her mental status and her ability to take care of herself, and convinces Elliot to order his men to stay away from her.
I'd appreciate it if your men would leave her alone till you and I have a chance to talk.
Whatever you want.
Moments later, Elliot's men bring a couple of defectors from the British Armed Forces, who were found trespassing on the ranch, and notify their boss. Having a mutual working agreement with Major Ashley Pitt, Elliot refuses to show the men mercy, taunts them, and fatally shoots them, while hoping to impress Matthew in the process. Unfazed by the murders he just committed, Elliot gloats about his favorite revolver and invites Matthew for dinner that evening. Over dinner, while one of Elliot's Aboriginal butlers waits on them, Elliot and Matthew get to know each other, discuss their views and their choice of weapons.
Are you familiar with the army revolver, Mr. Quigley?
Then, as the night progresses, Matthew makes a bold observation that Elliot already has too many armed goons by his side and asks why he needs him. However, he gets an unexpected answer from the ignorant wealthy man, who proudly disrespects his Aboriginal servant and inconsiderately goes on a misguided rant about the primitiveness of the Aboriginal people.
Its official policy is called pacification by force.
Then, Elliot narrates that his parents were slaughtered by the lawless Aboriginals and explains that the British government has allowed the local authorities to deal with the matter as they see fit. As Matthew wonders what any of this has to do with him, Elliot announces that he has hired him to wipe out the Aboriginals.
My parents were slaughtered by Aborigines, Mr. Quigley.
Outraged by the request and completely against the crime, Matthew throws Elliot out of his house. Shocked by the incident, Elliot's men rush to their boss's aid until he proudly orders them down.
Now stay right where you are. No man knocks me out of my own house.
Soon, Elliot realizes that he's unable to defend himself and orders his men to do his bidding. However, knowing Matthew's skill, the men fear for their safety and slowly creep into the house.
He's just sitting in there with that big gun.
However, inside the house, as Matthew prepares for the upcoming battle, he's unfortunately and unexpectedly attacked by the Aboriginal servant from behind.
Carver, take the side!
Talk about being blindsided. Who could have expected that Matthew would be attacked by one of the very people he's trying to protect? Is that loyalty or sheer fear of the boss? Using this opportunity to their advantage, Elliot's men gang up, drag Matthew out of the house and beat him to a pulp, along with Crazy Cora, who attempts to help him. After watching the brutal attack for a few minutes, Elliot orders his men to haul Matthew and Crazy Cora in a wagon and dump them away from the ranch, in the middle of the Australian wilderness, so that they will suffer and die.
Throw him in the wagon, haul him 2 days from here and dump him.
Following the order, two of Elliot's men, Coogan and Miller, load the almost unconscious duo on a wagon, drive them 2 days away from the station, and dump them in the torrid hot desert. Just as they proceed to drive off, Matthew taunts the goons to steal his gold coins. As the gullible Coogan returns to steal the gold coins, Matthew tries to negotiate for some water in exchange for the coins, but Coogan refuses to take the deal. Then, as Coogan proceeds to steal the precious gold coins, Matthew summons all his strength to grab a hidden knife and stab Coogan to death. Seeing this, Miller becomes terrified and tries to drive off as fast as he can. However, filled with anger and rage, Matthew carefully sets up his rifle, and despite the large distance in between, shoots and kills Miller on the first try. Then, rejuvenated with his feet, Matthew unties Crazy Cora, who immediately makes light of the situation and makes him feel better. Matthew and Crazy Cora then pick up a random direction and start walking in the hopes that it will lead them to a nearby town. They walk day and night in the brutal temperatures in hopes of getting somewhere to no avail. After a couple days of walking, Crazy Cora can no longer hold on and passes out. Seeing this, Matthew considers leaving the young woman behind for a moment and even proceeds to leave, but soon sympathizes with her, returns, and carries her along with his heavy rifle. That night, Matthew can no longer find the strength to go on, and he passes out alongside Crazy Cora. Elsewhere, Major Ashley Pitt and his cavalry find the bodies of Miller and Coogan and take them to the ranch as a show of good faith to Elliot. To preserve his pride and show that he's in control of the matter, Elliot casually promises to swiftly handle the situation by finding Matthew and Crazy Cora and avenging his men's deaths.
I have no doubt I'll find them.
On the other side of the wilderness, Matthew and Crazy Cora spend the night passed out in the desert. The next day, a group of Aboriginal people find them, closely inspect them, and, with guidance from their chief, take them to a special place to heal them. There, the group perform various rituals using ancient medicine, which somehow treats Matthew and Crazy Cora, who soon regain consciousness. After making sure Crazy Cora is okay, Matthew soon realizes that the Aboriginal group means no harm and becomes grateful for their help. Then, as he inspects his surroundings, he notices that the group has looked after his rifle and has carefully placed it beside him and becomes fascinated as to how they haven't attacked them to avenge all the injustice that's been done to them by the white population.
Something tells me you and I were on the shady side of dead.
Then, as the duo acclimates to their surroundings, some Aboriginal youngsters kindly bring them some live worms as a show of affection and respect. Hoping not to offend their new friends, both Crazy Cora and Matthew eat the unusual meal and show their gratitude, which delights the kids. The next day, despite not having any means of verbal communication, the Aboriginals and Matthew and Crazy Cora have fun, exchanging different skill sets and tricks of surviving in the wilderness. As the day goes on, Crazy Cora and Matthew form a real bond with the Aboriginals and come to understand their culture better. In the evening, the kind Aboriginals put on a traditional show for the duo, who truly appreciate the gesture and new friendship. That night, Crazy Cora and Matthew find a private moment and get to know each other. Crazy Cora narrates that her husband Roy had gone hunting when a group of drunk Comanches broke into her house. Fearing for her and her young son, Roy Jr.'s life, Crazy Cora hides in the root cellar with a pistol. However, a few minutes into the ordeal, Roy Jr. starts screaming at the top of his lungs, and despite his mother's efforts to calm him down, continues to cause a ruckus. Hoping to muffle the sound and evade notice by the invaders, Crazy Cora covers the young boy's mouth, but unfortunately ends up accidentally suffocating her son to death. Despite the invaders leaving the home, Crazy Cora, who's paralyzed with fear and grief, stays in the cellar all day until Roy returns home.
I was still afraid to come out of the cellar.
As Matthew sympathizes with the young woman's traumatic story, she adds that after learning what happened, Roy had stoically buried the baby and put her on a ship to Australia, after condemning her for what she did.
And he turned and he walked away and he never looked back.
After intently listening to the young woman pouring her heart out, Matthew begins to understand that her trauma is the source of her delusion and decides to be more patient with her and play along as Roy when needed. The next morning, after making sure that the duo has recovered well and sensing an upcoming danger, the Aboriginals leave Matthew and Cora, who stay asleep in a cave. Then, the duo wakes up and becomes disappointed to see the abrupt departure of their new friends. As they try to make sense of the matter, everything soon becomes clear as the duo sees armed men chasing the Aboriginals from a distance.
That's why.
The duo becomes devastated watching the primitive group, only equipped with spades, come up against Elliot's heavily armed men on horses and decide to interfere. To this effect, Matthew quickly grabs his rifle and prepares to take out Elliot's men, but becomes frustrated to see Cora running towards the danger zone without even a single means of protection. In the ensuing battle, despite using their spades skillfully, the Aboriginals are no match for the modern weapons and lose a few of their people. Luckily, Matthew finishes his preparations in time and expertly takes all but one of Elliot's men from a great distance, which helps the surviving Aboriginals safely escape. Once he makes sure all the threats have been neutralized and the surviving aggressor has fled back, Matthew rushes over to the battle site and scolds Cora, who mourns the death of an Aboriginal woman for her reckless and dangerous behavior.
You trying to get your head blown off?
Seeing how affected Cora is by the meaningless attack and resulting deaths, Matthew quickly softens up and advises her to be more careful. Then, as the duo process their predicament, they realize that the escaped attacker will soon inform Elliot of their location and return with more men.
The rider got away, which means Marston will know where we are.
Hence, the duo takes a horse off one of the dead men, and despite not knowing where they are, they start their journey with the goal of getting away from the site of the battle. After traveling all day, the duo takes rest for the night, where they get to know each other more. And Matthew warns Cora never to refer to him with another man's name if she ever wants a real relationship with him. Elsewhere, Elliot bonds with his men, showing off his excellent gunfighting skills, while teaching a young man named O'Flynn how to improve his shooting skills. However, this is interrupted when the survivor of the battle arrives at the station and shares everything that transpired in the desert.
Quigley, he was everywhere.
Infuriated by the death of his men, who got bested by a single man, Elliot offers a hefty reward for anyone who brings in Matthew.
£50 in gold to the man who brings Quigley in.
In the desert, Matthew and Cora cluelessly traverse the desert for hours, hoping to find their way out, but end up riding in circles. Then, as they contemplate their next move, they hear gunshots resounding through the nothingness of the wilderness, and follow the sound to find out the source. Moments later, the duo is horrified to reach the scene and see Elliot's men shooting at the Aboriginals and driving them off a cliff. Utterly infuriated by the cruelty against their friends, Matthew stations himself and uses his rifle to pick off the culprits one by one. Terrified and knowing they can't match Matthew's marksmanship, the men retreat and hide.
Get the bloody hell out of here, quick!
Observing all this, Cora is grief-stricken by the injustice and cries her eyes out. She then runs to the bottom of the cliff to check on the Aboriginal victims and becomes even more distraught at the number of dead bodies accumulated. Meanwhile, Matthew interrogates one of Elliot's men, who is severely injured, and tries to find out the direction to the nearest town and the location of Elliot's ranch.
Quigley! Marston Station's 2 days ride southwest!
Once he finds the information, Matthew honors his promise and gives the dying man a gun so that he can end his pain by killing himself. However, the desperate man foolishly tries to use the gun against Matthew until he's reminded of the gravity of his situation.
You got one shot left in that shooter. Make the most of it.
The wounded man then shoots and kills himself. Meanwhile, Cora silently mourns her friends at the foot of the cliff, and as she prepares to leave, she hears a child crying and rushes back to search for the source. Then, Cora becomes delighted to find a young baby boy who miraculously survived the gunshots and fall from the cliff, and carries him out with pure love. Matthew, Cora, and the baby ride through the desert for a few hours and decide to rest in a cave, so that the hungry, exhausted boy can recover. Then, after some recuperation, Cora notes that Matthew can travel faster by himself and advises him to go to the nearby town, while she rests in the cave with the baby. Then, seeing Matthew's hesitation to leave them behind in the wilderness, Cora shares that she is from Texas and knows her way around weapons.
Just leave me the extra rifle and pistol.
You know how to use a shooter?
The next morning, Matthew hunts a couple of lizards for Cora and the baby, gives her a pistol and water that can sustain the duo for 2 days, and prepares to leave. Then, seeing how attached Cora is to the baby boy, Matthew takes a moment to explain to the young woman that the boy will fare better with his own people, and asks her to give him back if she comes across the Aboriginals.
Should be back in 2 days. I ain't back in 3.
You'll be back.
Matthew promises to return in 2 days, bids farewell to Cora, and leaves the cave. He rides as fast as he can through the desert and arrives at the nearby town by evening. Matthew then heads to a general store to buy ammunition for his rifle and meets with the owner, Mr. Grimmelman, who warmly welcomes him. As the men get to know each other, they bond over their mutual hatred of Elliot. Imagine being so undeniably horrible that your transgression becomes a connecting moment for strangers. Elliot's cruelty really knows no bounds.
He is a murderer. He mixes flour with poison to kill the Aborigines.
Then, Mr. Grimmelman proudly introduces Matthew to his young son Klaus, who recognizes the marksman as the hero who has been helping the Aboriginals. It's quite nice to see that all of Matthew's unwavering effort to uphold justice and is going out of his way to fight for the Aboriginals is getting the recognition it deserves.
I know who you are. You're the American. The one who's been helping the Aborigines.
In the cave, the baby starts crying and screaming at the top of his lungs, which attracts dingoes towards the cave. Desperate, Cora frantically tries to calm him down so that they can remain out of danger. However, Cora is soon reminded of what happened to her son, and for fear of smothering the boy, stops her efforts. Instead, she decides to let him make as many noises as he wants while she goes after the dingoes with the gun. What a way to fight against trauma and seize the crippling fear that comes with it. Cora then pictures the dingoes as the Comanches that had invaded her house and scared her, and summons all her courage and bravely kills them all as they enter the cave. Meanwhile, in the small town, Matthew sends Klaus to fetch his horse for him as he prepares to return to the desert as soon as possible. However, despite the darkness of the night, Elliot's men recognize Matthew's saddle, abduct the boy, and cautiously prepare an attack. Unaware of this danger, Matthew is calmly escorted out by Mr. Grimmelman and his wife, who generously pack food and supplies for Cora and the baby. Touched by the kindness, Matthew thanks the couple, pays them with his gold coins, and prepares to leave, refusing their offer to rest there for the night. After a few minutes of waiting for Klaus, Matthew senses that something is wrong, orders the Grimmelmans to get back inside, and opens fire at the suspicious figures hidden in the shadows. Then, an intense battle breaks out in the streets of the small town between Matthew and many of Elliot's men. Soon, the store goes up in flames, which ends up completely destroying it. The chaos wakes the sleeping town, and while the locals frantically try to put out the ever-growing fire, Matthew uses his wit to outsmart his enemy.
Excuse me.
Then, one of the men pretends to surrender and attempts to catch Matthew off guard, to no avail. Despite conquering his enemies, Matthew's soon heartbroken to see that Mr. Grimmelman and Klaus were crying over Mrs. Grimmelman, who had been caught and killed in the crossfire. As he mourns the kind woman, Matthew is then attacked by the last surviving man, whom he soon attacks, but releases so that he can carry a message back to Elliot.
I ain't gonna kill you, because you're gonna go tell Marston I'm coming after him.
The next day, the panicked messenger arrives at the ranch and informs Elliot of everything that happened, which pressures Elliot to quickly come up with a plan for retribution.
Yes, sir.
And get him out of here, he's bleeding all over the rug.
After traveling the rest of the night, Matthew reaches the cave the next morning, but is horrified to see all the dead dingoes at the entrance. He then cautiously enters the cave and is relieved to see that Cora and the baby are okay. Then, Cora once again refers to Matthew as Roy and narrates that she had safeguarded their child and house from the Comanches. Despite being concerned by Cora's state of mind, Matthew praises the young woman for her bravery. Then, Matthew, Cora, and the baby start their journey back to the small town, arrive there by evening, and rest at Mr. Grimmelman's house. Later that evening, Cora prepares to return the baby to the Aboriginals, but has a hard time letting him go. After saying their farewell, with the help of Mr. Grimmelman, Matthew and Cora return the baby boy to the grateful Aboriginals. The next morning, despite Cora's advice to stay back, Matthew prepares to head to the ranch to end the dangerous animosity between him and Elliot once and for all. Then, after thanking the kind Mr. Grimmelman, Matthew bids farewell to Cora and starts his journey. After a few hours of traveling, Matthew reaches the ranch in the evening and sends her a message, announcing that he will withhold an attack and give the night to Elliot's men to reconsider their predicament and safely flee the ranch, should they no longer want to be involved before the outbreak of war in the morning.
Anyone can leave safely before dawn except Marston. Most cordially, Matthew Quigley.
Wow, what a gentlemanly thing to do. If it were me, I would have definitely taken this out and bolted. Instead of allowing his men to make their own decisions, Elliot convinces everyone that the message is intended to give them a false sense of security, and that an unexpected attack is coming during the night, and orders them to stay alert all night. The next morning, Elliot is furious to learn that 2 of his men had escaped during the night, but before he can react to the news, one of his men is shot and killed from a great distance by Matthew, who hides in the surrounding mountains. Frustrated, Elliot comes up with an unexpected strategy and sends his men to discreetly ambush Matthew from different directions. Soon, the first group of men chase Matthew, who expertly navigates the mountainous terrain on his horse and uses his wit to disarm his opponents and kill them all. Matthew then attacks the second group of Elliot's men and neutralizes them all. Unfortunately, soon one of the men pretends to surrender and shoots Matthew in the leg. Then, before Matthew can retaliate, he is captured by the last of Elliot's men, O'Flynn and his partner, and is soon tied to a horse and dragged through the desert all the way to the ranch. As soon as they reach the ranch, excited to receive the 200 pounds in gold finder's reward Elliot had offered, O'Flynn and his partner jubilantly announce their feat.
Alive! Well, half alive.
Good work, you two.
After congratulating his men, Elliot mocks the severely banged-up Matthew. Elliot orders his men to get Matthew on his feet and place a rifle a few feet away from him. Then, as per their boss's order, the men put a revolver in Matthew's belt and prepare him for a gunfight with Elliot, who cockily prepares to show off his superior expertise in revolvers, kill Matthew, and restore his pride.
To your left a bit. That's it.
Matthew calmly takes in everything, swiftly acts and uses the revolver to fatally shoot all 3 men in the blink of an eye. Matthew then approaches the dying Elliot and tells him off for undermining him.
Said I never had much use for one. Never said I didn't know how to use it.
A few minutes later, after confirming that Elliot and all of his men are dead and realizing the reign of terror is over, Elliot's Aboriginal butler comes out of the house, hands Matthew his rifle as a show of respect and gratitude, takes off his butler's uniform, and quietly walks away to join his people and live in freedom as a few Aboriginal servants follow in tow. All alone on the ranch, Matthew breathes a sigh of relief and takes a moment to process everything. However, this only lasts a few minutes as Matthew sees Major Ashley Pitt, who had been informed of Matthew's activities by Elliot, and his fully armed cavalry rush toward the ranch. Can a man get a minute of peace? Seems like trouble follows Matthew everywhere. Matthew collects himself and prepares his weapons and ammunition for what he presumes will be a bloodbath and waits for the cavalry. The odds are obviously against Matthew this time, as it's 1 against the cavalry of men, but one sure must appreciate his do-or-die mentality. The cavalry soon reaches Matthew, informs him that he's a wanted man, and reads him a lengthy list of charges.
This paperwork says that we can hang you.
Unfazed by the mayor's warning that his list of crimes may warrant a death by hanging verdict, Matthew refuses to go along with them and stand trial. The cavalry then intimidates Matthew to surrender at gunpoint.
Or you can die right here, bearing arms against the army of Her Majesty the Queen.
Luckily, soon, thousands of Aboriginals, led by their chief, appear out of nowhere, surround the cavalry in a stoic stance, ready for a fight. The odds turn the other way within just a few minutes, and sensing the looming danger, the major and his cavalry tuck their tail behind their tails and retreat. Then, Matthew and the chief exchange a non-verbal show of appreciation and respect, and to Matthew's surprise, the Aboriginals all disappear as quickly as they showed up. Then, once everything settles, Matthew tends to his leg wound and returns to the small town. A few days later, Matthew and Cora head to the ticket station to get a ticket back to America. There, once learning that the duo is heading to America, the ticket clerk cautiously asks Matthew his name, as he had been told to be on the lookout for the wanted Matthew, and breathes a sigh of relief when Matthew uses the name of Cora's ex-husband and registers his name as Roy Cobbs. After purchasing the tickets, as Matthew and Cora head to the boat, Cora calls Matthew by his real name for the first time, and the duo lovingly embrace.